Good evening to you from our studios in Caracas, Venezuela. My name is Reagan Devines. We begin with the headlines. Colombia's FARC rebels and the government work together to come to another landmark decision. The final death toll uncertain after a gas explosion in Brazilian city. And we'll give you an update on the collaboration between Syrian and Russian forces. The details on these stories and more right now on From the South. Thank you for being here with us. We begin with the Colombian government and the FARC rebels, who have reached yet another major agreement over the weekend. Both parties agreed to search for those who have gone missing during the 50-year-old civil war. The FARC has made the commitment to turn over information on the location and identification of the remains of people who died in its custody. Both the rebel group and the government will give information to the International Committee of the Red Cross about the missing so that the charity can help design search plans. This accord resolves another of the outstanding issues for the final peace agreement, which both parties have agreed to sign before March 23, 2016.
Today, an agreement was reached on a number of immediate, confidence-building measures that consist of the search, location, identification, and dignified handover of people gone missing in the context of the armed conflict. These measures will be implemented immediately. The families of the people that were given up for disappeared have the right to clean the wounds by locating the remains, and they have the right to know what happened.
Commemorated the 13th anniversary of the so-called Operación Orión, when the government of Álvaro Uribe tried to recapture a sector of the city disputed by right-wing paramilitaries and popular militias. According to the relatives, 272 people were killed and 98 are still missing. In a performance to mark the anniversary, protesters buried themselves up to their waists.
In Operation Orion, there were many victims who went missing and were buried in the La Escombrera dump. Today we're here asking that they are exhumed and delivered with dignity to each of their families.
Colombia's second guerrilla organization, the ELN, has said it also wants its peace talks with the government to move into a new phase. Instead of the secret negotiations undertaken so far, the ELN's top leader, Pablo Bertrand, announced that he wants the talks to become public.
In all these topics, like the democratization of the country, the changes needed, the situation of the victims, and the end of the conflict, we need the population as a whole to participate and take the lead. So we are ready to move a phase of open, public negotiations.
The search for victims continues after a gas explosion shook Rio de Janeiro in Brazil in the early hours of this morning. The death toll currently stands at 8 and 8 more injured. The explosion took place at 3 a.m. and completely destroyed 14 buildings. The civil police are investigating claims that a pizza restaurant had maintained a deposit of illegally acquired gas canisters believed to be the cause of the incident. The statewide gas provider, CEG, of the Gas Natural Fenosa Group, confirmed in a statement that it did not have a contract providing piped gas to the pizzeria in question. The explosion was heard in a town 6 kilometers away. Venezuela has undertaken a mock election before the parliamentary elections this coming December 6th. All polling centers across the country participated in the activity. The government was verifying the operation of the voting systems as well as the logistical details, which they say so far are working well. They reiterated that they will not accept any irregularities.
We are very happy, and we have to put out observations to correct that which needs to be corrected. If the head of the UBCH does not participate, they will have to explain it, because they have to actively participate in the elections. If a witness is not present, it has to be explained. Reasons have to be given. Their excuses for whatever reason they were not there have to be good reasons. With this, we can fix it. We have time to correct those details. For December 6th, we have enough time.
And the Vice President of Planning and Knowledge said that because of the economic war against the country since 2006, inflation and poverty are indicators that do not correlate. That is, that the economic war has pushed inflation while the government brings down poverty.
Antes del 2006, uno observa que hay una
Before
absoluta
2006,
correlación
one
entre
observes
el
an absolute
incremento de la
correlation between
inflación
the
y la
increase of
subida de
inflation
la
and the
pobreza.
rise of poverty.
Sin embargo, a
However,
partir de todo este
from this
momento, que
moment, an
precisamente
economic
donde
war
arrecia
rages,
la
and
guerra
we start to
económica,
observe that
empieza a
there's no
observar que no
correlation
empiezan a
between the
tener
two
una
variables.
correlación las dos
That
variables,
is,
es decir,
if both
tanto
poverty
la
and inflation
pobreza
begin to
como
drop,
la
this is a
inflación
normal
empiezan a
correlation.
dejar de
This
estar
is normal in all
correlacionadas.
capitalist
Esto es un
countries of
dato
the
que es
world.
normal en
Every
todos
time
los
there is
países
inflation,
capitalistas del
there's an
mundo.
increase
Cada
in
vez que hay más
poverty.
inflación,
But
hay
Venezuela
mayor
has
nivel de
managed to
pobreza.
rupture
Pues
this,
bien,
with poverty
Venezuela
going
ha
down
logrado una
while inflation
ruptura
exists.
en cuanto a lo que es el comportamiento de la inflación y lo que
As the October 25th general elections in Argentina approaches, the ruling Progressive Front for Victory Party presidential candidate Daniel Scioli said that negotiating vulture funds is not on his agenda. Scioli leads in the polls, but it is not clear if he will garner enough votes to avoid a runoff election on November 22nd. The popular governor of Buenos Aires province also explained that his campaign was designed to aid the most vulnerable people in the country.
Economic independence is social and economic debt reduction like our motherland has. It's the result of a political drive and strategy that gives us freedom and unsurpassable possibilities to successfully reach this project's next chapter, which is the development of Argentina.
And both Scioli and his rival Mauricio Macri appealed to the Peronist vote at their rallies on Peronist Loyalty Day.
We have 5.5 days before the campaigns close. My God, the time has come. The time has come for this healthy rebellion, which has led us up to this point, to tell Argentina and the world, let's stand up. We will build the Argentina we dream of, all together.
The Argentine chief of cabinet said that the electoral process on Sunday will be exemplary.
The government is hoping that the election will be a great example, as have been all other elections, without any hiccups, and that the citizenship can express themselves properly, and that the results are those expressing popular will and nothing else. That's the goal.
Bolivia is examining hundreds of historical documents to help win its case against Chile for access to the Pacific Ocean. The government opened up some files to the public for one day after huge public interest in the ongoing battle. Earlier this month, Chile said it would start negotiations with President Morales' government, but Bolivia said that the proposal was nothing but a lie. Our correspondent Dimitri O'Donnell reports from La Paz.
These are the documents that Bolivia is evaluating to support its case against Chile for access to the Pacific. Some date back as far as 1899, detailing the diplomatic negotiations that have taken place between Chile and Bolivia since the latter lost the War of the Pacific. The government is looking for historical evidence to prove the nation has a legal right to the sea.
Today is highly valued for us. We want this history to become a document for the present. This is to demonstrate that if Bolivia had sea once, we can show the world that this maritime claim is justified.
The UN's International Court of Justice ruled last month it will continue hearing Bolivia's case to force its neighbour to enter talks to grant it a corridor to the Pacific. Bolivians said it was a day they would never forget, but Chile claimed the country had won nothing. Since then, diplomatic relations have worsened.
So far, the conflict or different point of views about how to reconstruct the relationship between Bolivia and Chile has reached ground zero.
Every government building in La Paz is draped with the flag symbolizing the struggle to regain the country's loss of coastline. Bolivia says having its own ports would reduce trading costs and boost the economy. Bolivia and Chile have not had full diplomatic relations since the 1970s, and with both sides claiming to have legitimate rights to the Pacific, it could be years before the impasse is finally resolved. Dimitri O'Donnell, Telesur, at the Foreign Office in La Paz.
A dramatized documentary in Mexico is causing scandal and protest. The film, called Night in Iguala, depicts what happened to the 43 disappeared Ayotzinapa students. Yet the families and classmates of the youth argue that it is part of a smear campaign to criminalize their movement for truth and justice. Our correspondent Clayton Khan has more.
Rejecting what they say is a manipulation of the facts and a means to profit, students from the Ayotzinapa Teachers Training College and activists protest the film Night in Iguala, a pseudo-documentary that critics say is almost exclusively based on the government's version of how the 43 Ayotzinapa students were disappeared.
While we are still far from the truth of what happened in Iguala, we need to see both sides of things. And with that in mind, with our own conclusions and our criteria, we only come to ask you in a peaceful way to reflect. We come to say that this movie is a historic lie.
Critics view the film produced by journalist Jorge Fernandez Menendez as part of a government-sponsored propaganda wave to discredit the families and classmates of the victims. Over the past year since the events in Iguala occurred, dozens of books, films, and other materials have been produced or published to influence public opinion.
It depends on what the intention is. If the intention is to support the parents, support the movement, expose what happened, I think it is very valuable. However, there is another side. There are those who want to take advantage of this, who want to continue the lies.
Meanwhile, the parents of the missing 43 youth urge a boycott of the film, saying that it is the last of this wave to delegitimize not just their actions and protests for truth and justice, but of those who support them as well.
There are times when the media is bought by the government and by people not like us. And their objective is that they want to hurt anyone, not just the parents.
Yet analysts argue that media smear campaigns against the families of the victims and even media productions that are questionable in their veracity are signs of intolerance toward dissent.
When a government becomes authoritarian, it seeks hegemony over the truth, and any dissent voice needs to be made quiet. In this case, there is also the attempt to criminalize the victim.
Meanwhile, another documentary on the Ayotzinapa case produced by independent journalist Tamores Greco is receiving the backing of the students and families, incrementing the war of words, ideas, and positions of who has control of truth in the Ayotzinapa case. Clayton Cantelesur, Mexico City.
At least 3 days have gone by since Mexican authorities claim to have cornered the Sinaloa cartel leader Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, who once again evaded detention. The government says El Chapo was injured as he escaped, but they have failed to explain how they got close enough to observe that he was injured without capturing him or any of his associates. Rescue and support work continues in El Salvador for citizens in danger due to the heavy rains which began days ago. Civil protection units visited various parts of the country to check areas in danger of the rain to ensure that there is no danger of deaths from mudslides or flooding. There was also a total suspension of school classes and a yellow alert. And coming up after the break, more than 10,000 refugees are currently in Serbia, stranded by limits imposed further west in Europe. We'll tell you why next.
The world is divided among continents and nations. Nations are divided by borders and interests. These interests divide the news. We examine the impact of these divisions on people and power. This is Imaginary Lines. Watch it on telesurtv.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there. A world infinitely connected. Millions of people instantaneously interacting. Experiences relayed in 144 characters. Millions of lives in every corner of the planet. They're not tweets, they're stories. Watch it on telesurtv.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there. Rod stars G1 and Claudia de la Cruz are Rebel Diaz, hip-hop activists positioned within a history of political resistance through music. And You Don't Stop. They invite young people to express themselves about their social struggles. And You Don't Stop. Watch it on telesurtv.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there.
Women and children are among the victims in the latest round of attacks by Syrian and Russian forces. This is according to Syrian paramedics in the town of Al-Zarabeh. A resident added that the closest hospital to the attacks is at least 20 kilometers away. Syrian fighters have been advancing on rebel-held locations with the backing of Russian air support for the past few weeks. Russia, a longtime ally of Syria, commenced its airstrikes against Syrian rebels on September 30th with the hope of containing any threat to President Bashar al-Assad and his regime. Meanwhile, NATO is concerned over what they say is an increasing Russian military presence from the Baltics to Syria, although its officials say that the strength of the NATO alliance far outweighs that of the Russian military. There are concerns on Russia's possible setup of defensive zones of influence, which can present a challenge for the passage of non-Russian air, land and sea machinery from crossing certain areas.
So we're very concerned about the Russian military buildup. The increasing concentration of forces in Kaliningrad, in the Black Sea, and now in the Eastern Mediterranean does indeed pose some additional challenges that our planners are going to have to take seriously into account as we consider how to live up to the pledge that we've made to defend any ally against any threat. A lot of experts talk about the so-called anti-access area denial capability that Russia is developing, and this indeed will have to be a key factor as we decide what is necessary both to defend every ally and to deter Russia from even thinking about aggressive actions against NATO.
Israel has come under heavy scrutiny over its treatment of Palestinians over the past month. Reports are that some 100 Palestinian citizens have been arrested during protests, including minors. According to the discriminatory laws database, there are more than 50 Israeli laws that discriminate against Palestinian citizens in Israel in areas of their right to political participation, access to land, education, state budget resources, and criminal procedures. Many are keeping a close eye on the group Pegida, the Patriotic Europeans Against the Islamization of the West, which has been mobilizing thousands of followers of late. However, several counter-demonstrators have been mobilizing as well against what they say is right-wing extremism. The marches for and against Islamization have been highly debated in the face of the influx of refugees from countries with a Muslim majority. Canadians are still at the polls to vote for the country's next Prime Minister and Parliament. Polls will close in the next few hours, but pre-polls show a desire for change with Liberal leader Justin Trudeau, the son of a former Prime Minister, tipped to end 9 years of Conservative rule. The latest polls had the left-leaning Liberal Party at 39% and the Conservatives at 30%. Egyptian voters have snubbed the first phase of parliamentary elections that President Sisi said is a milestone toward democracy, but others say is a sham. Some polling stations had a turnout of just 10%, suggesting a downturn in Sisi's popularity. The vote for the 596-member parliament will be held in 2 phases, ending on December 2nd. There is a marked absence of opposition parties such as the banned Muslim Brotherhood, and most of those on the polls are Sisi supporters. European nations continue to be baffled with the way forward in dealing with the thousands of people flocking to their borders, mostly to get to Germany. After Hungary closed its borders, refugees have been traveling west from Serbia into Croatia. Last week, the EU proposed a plan to Turkey, just north of Syria, to allow them to better accommodate refugees, a plan that Turkey was not too happy with.
We have for months been saying that this is an international crisis and it cannot be resolved by one country opening and one country closing borders. We need a holistic approach of the European Union. These people were already in EU territory. Then they didn't get an asylum procedure which only to end up at a closed EU border. This is not acceptable. We need this solution and we need it fast.
And now a brief look at other stories making news around the world.
During a meeting with Saudi Arabian King Salman, Germany's foreign minister raised the topic of detained Saudi blogger Raif Badawi. Badawi has been sentenced to 1,000 lashes and 10 years in jail for insulting Islam. The foreign minister added that they are waiting on progress in the Badawi case. The leader of France's far-right National Front, Marine Le Pen, will go to trial on Tuesday for comparing Muslim street prayers to wartime Nazi occupation. The prosecutor's office accuses Le Pen of incitement of discrimination over people's religious beliefs. Reports are that thus far 16 people have been found dead after Typhoon Kopu hit the Philippines over the weekend. Officials say the death toll is expected to rise. Some say it was the worst storm they had ever experienced.
This image is 100,000 times smaller.
Scientists have created a new resolution tool on a microscope which can produce images 100,000 times smaller than the width of a human hair. They hope the new microscope can benefit many industries including medicine, as well as the development of new semiconductors and lithium-ion batteries.
Human hair is about...
And the World Health Organization says among the 1.25 million people that are killed in traffic accidents, the majority occur in African countries, which they say has the most dangerous roads. The WHO said that road fatalities are the 8th leading cause of deaths in the world, but can be cured through good laws and the implementation of those laws.
Brazilians won the international male and female categories in the 5th annual Hong Kong's New World Harbour Race on Sunday. Just over 2,300 swimmers took part in the 1.5-kilometre event from Kowloon Sam Tai Suen in Lei Wei Moon to Quarry Bay Park. However, the event was not without controversy as 48 swimmers were disqualified for jumping the gun, saying they could not hear it. Others said that many racers were standing beyond the start line, and that the race was poorly organized. However, from the looks of it, the majority had quite a bit of fun. The Japanese kimono has gotten a rock and roll makeover at this year's Tokyo Week. Designers have revamped the Japanese classic by using fabrics such as jeans, wool, and even denim, moving away from the heavy silk material that is traditionally used. The garment has been on a steady decline due to both high costs and Western influence, but observers said the fashion industry's renewed interest may do more to ensure its survival. And finally this evening, over 5,000 people took to the streets of the Chilean capital, Santiago, as part of the city's annual pre-Halloween zombie walk on Saturday. Participants wore frightening costumes and gruesome makeup and gathered at a central Santiago square to begin their walk through the city. Event organizers say that the zombie walk is meant to promote equality and tolerance of zombie culture. Other cities that take part in the event include Buenos Aires, Bogota, New York, and Singapore. I love that, zombies. There is more on these and other stories on our website, telesurtv.net/English, from our news teams in Quito, Ecuador, and right here in Caracas, Venezuela, for Telesur English. I'm Regan Devines. Have a great evening. We'll see you tomorrow.